With week 14 now officially behind us, we are now gearing up for the most important part of fantasy football, and that is the fantasy playoffs, which makes this waiver wire the most important week for you to make sure that you have the right players on your rosters to assure that you have fantasy football success by hoisting that fantasy trophy by the end of the season. And in this video, I'm going to be going over a handful of players that you got to be adding through the waiver wire this week to guarantee success for your fantasy rosters. Now, the first player that we're going to be going over is going to be Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver out of the New York Jets. And he's currently only rostered in 2.7% of ESPN leagues. He's coming off a great game where he had 8 receptions on 12 targets, someone that was really efficient. And in this past week, you saw a different output for Mitchell, who led the way for the Jets with 8 receptions on 12 targets for 102 yards and also had a touchdown. And we saw this past week that no other pass catcher was as effective as Mitchell was versus the Atlanta Falcons. And what intrigues me is that he does have a tough matchup versus the Miami Dolphins, who actually allow the 9th fewest points to opposing wide receivers. However, this past week, this same Miami defense actually gave up 239 yards to Saints wide receivers. And for me, the volume is what intrigues me for Mitchell, and that will draw me to want to actually get him in my rosters, especially considering that since joining the Jets, he has had a 28.4% target share while averaging 51.3 receiving yards. So Mitchell for me becomes someone that you need to add, someone that could be a strong flex play considering that we do have week 14 buys coming up as well. Now, the next player that I'm going to encourage you to add is going to be someone that quite frankly came out of nowhere this past week, and that's going to be Devon Vele, wide receiver out of the New Orleans Saints. He's currently only rostered in 0.6% of ESPN leagues. And we saw here that in this matchup, he was only behind Juwan Johnson, who had 9 targets. And you saw also Chris Olave have 7 targets. And it was really quite something to see him do really well, considering since the bye week, he has actually had 2 games where now he's seeing a good amount of targets. Last week, he saw 7 targets. This past matchup, he saw 8. And he does have some matchups that also get me really interested in wanting to invest in Vele, considering that he's going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as well as the Carolina Panthers, who are both middle of the pack defenses when it comes to how they defend against opposing pass catchers. So if you're looking for Devon Vele, he's someone that probably is worth no more than 10% of your fab, but someone still worthwhile, especially considering that we are going into bye weeks this upcoming week as we gear up for week 14. Now, another player that I'm actually really intrigued about adding is going to be Kyle Monangai, running back out of the Chicago Bears. He's only currently rostered in 56% of ESPN leagues. I know that's a little bit higher than some of the other players that we just mentioned, but the reason why he's someone that I'm adding is because we're still seeing, despite DeAndre Swift being back in this offense, Kyle Monangai saw a good amount of usage. And you can see here how well they were able to run over this Philadelphia Eagles defense. Kyle Monangai had 130 yards on the ground to go along with DeAndre Swift with 125 yards. Both of these guys had also touchdowns to add to their box scores. And what makes Kyle Monangai really interesting is that he has now had 3 straight games with double-digit attempts, and I believe that we are seeing a strong 1-2 punch between DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai. And again, the defense versus the Philadelphia Eagles was quite advantageous, considering that Philadelphia hasn't been all that strong in that scenario versus opposing running backs. But I will say, be very careful with how you're going to be managing expectations for Kyle Monangai. He has a 3-week stretch that isn't really all that ideal for any running back, considering that he's going up against the Green Bay Packers in twice in 3 games, and in between that, they're going to be facing the Cleveland Browns. Both of these defenses are top 10 defenses when it comes to points allowed to opposing running backs. Now, if you are shallow or if you are just pretty depleted because of injuries or bye weeks, Kyle Monangai is still someone that I would be heavily investing in just to at least secure some depth at the running back position on my fantasy rosters. This next must-add for your running back position is going to be Chuba Hubbard, running back out of the Carolina Panthers. You can see here that his roster percentage is pretty high at 63.5%, but I think he is very much worth investing in, especially after the week that we just saw him put up versus the Los Angeles Rams. You can see this game log right here that Chuba Hubbard led the way for all running backs with 83 yards for the Carolina Panthers. He had 17 carries versus Rico Dowdle, who had 18 carries for 58 yards. So Chuba Hubbard was the clear, much more efficient running back for this Carolina offense. And you can see here, he also was the one that outsnapped Rico Dowdle, 38 snaps compared to 27 for Dowdle. And for me, quite frankly, just to see how well he was able to run all over the Rams was actually really interesting. And there's this really great chart here that you can see that Chuba Hubbard was used in early downs 19 times out of the 43 opportunities that the Carolina Panthers ran for all running backs, and was also involved in 12 of 13 third down plays. And the reason why this is important to note is because there is this great tweet that I saw earlier today from Mike K, where he says that during an interview earlier on Monday, Chuba Hubbard shared how he started to feel like himself again. And this is important considering that if we were going to start seeing this output on a regular basis, Chuba Hubbard is someone that you need to be investing in and quickly scanning your waiver wires, because of course, with him being available in 63.5% of ESPN leagues, he is very much worthwhile looking into and someone that I think will make a huge difference, especially as we are gearing up for the fantasy playoffs. Now, this next player that you're going to be wanting to add to your fantasy rosters is going to be Christian Watson, wide receiver out of the Green Bay Packers. Now, I understand, trust me, I get it. It is so frustrating to gauge to see which wide receiver in this Green Bay offense is going to be the one to roster. Currently, right now, Christian Watson is only rostered in 52% of ESPN leagues. He actually finished this game with 4 receptions on 10 targets for 80 yards and a touchdown. He had a 51-yard touchdown that looked absolutely beautiful. You can see here in this recap over here, just Jordan Love launching it. And this is Christian Watson's game. He's someone that is always available is always available deep, and someone that tends to execute really well in these kinds of plays. And the point is that Christian Watson, ever since coming back in week 8, he has been someone that has been averaging 12.6 points per game. He is someone that is constantly available as a deep threat target for Jordan Love, and that value alone makes it so worthwhile. And in this chart over here, you can see the steady increase in productivity for Christian Watson since coming back in week 8, but it also speaks to the volatility within this offense. The only one that you feel confident not starting is going to be Matthew Golden until further notice. However, Christian Watson, because of the high floor, is someone that you need to be investing in and adding to your fantasy rosters. Hey, we have a few more players to go over, but before we do so, thank you so much for helping us have a fantastic season with 1,000 subscribers. If you are getting value, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button as well as the subscribe button. Let's go over these last few players. And this next player is going to be running back Jordan Mason from the Minnesota Vikings. And the reason why we are sharing this is because Jordan Mason is currently rostered in only 53.1% of ESPN leagues. And we saw that unfortunately Aaron Jones left the game early, and Jordan Mason was able to take over and lead as the RB1 for this Minnesota Vikings in a very tough loss this past week. And we have seen already, Mason has been able to be effective when filling in as the RB1 for the Vikings, and that's why I'm looking to at least add him. If at the very least we see that Aaron Jones is available for week 14, I would still consider Jordan Mason to be someone that you need to be adding just for the handcuff value. And the latest update that we have gotten as far as Aaron Jones is that the Vikings do not believe that his shoulder injury is anything serious and is now considered to be day-to-day. So this is someone that is still worthwhile looking into and at least monitoring for the time being. But if we hear any news that he is regressing as far as him being available, I believe that he's someone definitely worthwhile adding. And when you look at the upcoming matchups too, we see here that the Vikings are going up against the Washington Commanders in week 14. The Washington Commanders are a team that actually allow the 3rd most points to opposing RBs with 23.4 points per game, which means that for me, Jordan Mason is a priority add, especially if he is getting the nod as the RB1 in this matchup. And just to speak to how advantageous this matchup is versus the Commanders are a defense that since week 2 have allowed 75 rushing yards or a touchdown to running backs in every single matchup. So Jordan Mason, especially just like I said, if he is to get the nod as the RB1 for the Vikings, is going to be a must start, and I will rank him really high in this upcoming matchup in week 14. This final player that I'm going to be sharing is going to be Bam Knight, running back out of the Arizona Cardinals. He's currently only rostered in 36.8% of ESPN leagues, and we know that Trey Benson's situation is quite iffy, but the point is Bam Knight had a really solid outing in week 13. He had 11 carries for 62 yards while averaging 5.6 yards per carry. Also was able to convert all 3 of his targets for 36 yards as well as a touchdown. And in this matchup, it was quite simply that we saw both him and Michael Carter share a similar output as far as snaps goes. You can see here that Michael Carter led the way for the Arizona Cardinals with 32 snaps versus Bam Knight's 29. But even when you look further into the box score, you can even see too that Michael Carter, someone that was still very much involved in this passing game. And you can see here, despite being outsnapped, Bam Knight clearly got all the groundwork here compared to Michael Carter's 5 carries. Bam Knight having 11 here, but you can see here that of course the running back that is getting all the passing usage is going to be Michael Carter, who ended the game with 5 receptions, 6 targets, 47 yards. But what does intrigue me about going for Bam Knight is because we do not know what is happening with the situation with Trey Benson. Unfortunately, what we're hearing though is head-scratching updates on Trey Benson heading into week 14. So the window is open for them to utilize Trey Benson, but we do not know if he'll be available, considering that he didn't practice on Thursday and Friday, and then of course we got the alert that he was not going to be available for the matchup this past Sunday. So I'll monitor this one very closely, and of course I'm not going to be all that excited about getting Bam Knight, but if the Cardinals are going to go with their committee more or less with the 1-2 push with Bam Knight and Michael Carter, I will definitely lean on Bam Knight, considering we have seen consistent production from him already, filling in as that RB1, especially when Arizona leans on that committee approach. I'll just tread carefully when it comes to managing expectations for any Arizona running back, considering that they're playing the Rams next week that actually allow the 3rd fewest points to opposing RBs, and the following week they will be playing the Houston Texans, who actually allow the 11th fewest points to opposing RBs on a points per game basis. Assuming that you don't have any more bye weeks to have to cover for, I would start clearing up your benches now and utilize any of these players to add as stashes, considering that some of these players are going to have some strong matchups that'll be really advantageous for your fantasy rosters. So I hope you found value in this video. Be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, take care. God bless. Peace.